So my friend's Bell Hooks has left this realm, unfortunately, and it's important to take a moment to thank her for her contributions. So I have been a long-term fan of Bell Hooks, and I have been a recent heretic of the Bell Hooksian line. And the reason so is because decolonization is my primary concern. And I have realized that a lot of these intersectional washing of our society, of our institutions, and this militant intersectionality, this prescriptive intersectionality, as opposed to and this intersectionality that's used for analysis, is really harmful in that it allows for racism and patriarchal attitudes to be sneaking in from the back door. And so people in this world that we live in say one thing and do the other. This type of insanity has been doubled down, and we can see the ends of this logic with regards to how microaggressions have become the primary aspect of our analysis, and how fat phobia instead of and how this idea of fat phobia has become normalized. The reason why these types of ideologies have become normalized is because they are immune from critique. They have armies of people who basically censor critique, and instead they strawman, they platform strawman that they can easily bring down. And this kind of prescriptive intersectionality is not helpful. It's actually harmful. It's a form of colonization. And the reason is because neoliberalism sneaks through, okay? And it's actually destructive. Okay, so despite the interesting and wonderful perspectives that Bell Hooks has brought to the table, she has not realized that in her works, where, and not just her works, but in the intersectionality literature in general, where we have moralized the commodification of emotional labor, we are normalizing a neoliberal subjectivity from the back door. And so, and the craziest part about this is that because the academic institutions are so closed off in their ability to actually think, in their ability to go against the grain, that thinking is becoming incredibly difficult. Critical thinking is becoming incredibly difficult. And because I, fancy of myself as a critical thinker with no need to basically be tied down to a sociality, I've realized early on in my career, in my academic career, because I read a lot, that intersectionality is taking us down a very dark path. And without realizing that intersectionality, prescriptive, and every time I say intersectionality, I really mean prescriptive intersectionality, not analytic intersectionality. Prescriptive meaning you actively go out and, these children are playing, and you go to the children and you try to make them racially conscious. I think that's very problematic in terms of our old school way of doing things, which was color blindness. Now, the new form of I'm not racist but ideology is this kind of course I agree with the public ideology in some way. You qualify, you say, of course I agree with the public ideology in this way or that way, and then you go about enacting your racism, you go around enacting your classism in your everyday rituals with other people. So it's just this complete narcissism that's taken over these progressive movements. And the only way you can really notice it is by, taking those critiques of the right seriously when it comes to their claims about oppression Olympics or virtue signaling and all of these things. Those guys who speak about this kind of thing, they don't need any intellectual theory, they don't need any deep theory to think about that stuff. It's right there in the face. And through our nuance, we kind of overcomplicate things and don't see what's just straight up right in front of us. And that's basically, and something that's normalized by Roxane Gay feminism, which is that you can say one thing and just not follow it. You can act the other way because it's too much emotional labor. It's too much actual work to do such a thing. And the other thing is, I've talked about this before, is how performativity is seen as a form of emotional labor, which is insane to me, which is kind of this, again, a viewpoint that can only come out of a narcissistic, privileged, and inability to take on a critique from outside of your own perspective. So I have this series of texts here that I'm going to be basically criticizing intersectionality with, starting with this little explanation here. Is the intersectionality metaphor useful or is it harmful? On the face of it, intersectionality is fairly straightforward and intuitive idea. The structures and forces that enable and constrain social identities and identifications and our actions in response to these are multiple and interacting, and are part of a large social blah 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 blah. See, this is actually part of this religion, right? This religion where, of course, intersectionality is correct. You have to do this, and then you finally move into and she does this way later on in the text. So it's already, she explains intersectionality. She says, I know what it is. I'm part of the religion. Blah, blah, blah. You have to play all of these social capital games. Social capital games where people like Carrie Bourassa and other sociopaths repeat also intersectional rhetoric, these neoliberal idioms, and they get grant money for it, right? And that kind of question within psychology of where is the money coming from, of how neoliberal subjectivity is being enacted, is something that Thomas Teo, critical psychologist is what he called himself, is actually thinking about, which is a tiny bit refreshing. I don't really have much hope for the discipline of psychology because of just the insanity that has taken over the discipline of psychology. So intersectionality has not been immune to controversy and debate. So here are a bunch of people. Although a sustained discussion of this work is not possible here and would at any rate take the present work off its intended course, a couple of themes from more critical accounts of reactions or of intersectionality bear mentioning. This is basically what I want to do right now, is just really flesh out what the fuck intersectionality is doing to us. Okay, and when it's applied outside of the United States, intersectionality has to stay in the United States. Okay, and then we're gonna talk about several different articles about this. So, for example, intersectional scholarship. The first concerns vagueness of the intersectional concept and the lack of clear implications it holds of what intersectional scholarship and activism would look like in concrete terms. Thank you. Okay. 99% of the literature is just empty rhetoric. 99.9%, okay? Yeah, we need to listen to all the fucking people. We need to do this, we need to do that. People are just repeating all of these empty idioms and pretending like good things are going to happen if we just, cognitive behavioral therapy ourselves out of this. So within and between this ambiguity, between these different perspectives, the only thing that actually comes through is neoliberalism. Although this flexibility gives intersectionality some some of its broad appeal, it also presents the risk that this framework will be used in contexts in which it has been divorced from its origins as a challenge to narrow and oppressive views of race and gender identity. A second theme concerns how the widespread appropriation of intersectionality might lead to remarginalizing women of... Why just women of color are you just worried about? It remarginalizes everybody. Can you just understand this? As well as other groups of women who are not well represented within white third wave feminism. See, it's within... You have to keep arguing from within the ideology. Okay, you can't just be like, look, it affects men in a negative way. It affects a lot of people, racialized people in general, in a definite way. But it has to play this game. It has to play this social capital game. The social capital game is part of this neoliberal subjectivity. Okay, who gives you grant money? Which is fully at odds with Crenshaw's central argument for demarginalizing through incorporation of an intersectional understanding of identity and oppression. Okay, so Hira 2016, this one's really good, and Lutz as well. These two are really good. Okay, and we're going to be looking at that. It could be argued that intersectionality has been used as a mechanism for further entrenching identity politics in feminist theory and other sites in which it has been taken up. It's just that the identity categories are now intersectional ones. A third theme points to the complex and thorny issue of how intersectionality has been used, explicitly or implicitly, to advance neoliberal political agenda. Yes, yes, that's what I'm talking about. The primary concern is that within the current neoliberal milieu and original goal of intersectionality to undertake a radical and complex analysis of institutionalized power relations comes the very real risk that the analysis will remain at the individual instead of a collective level. That's okay. It can't escape. Intersectionality is because it can't escape from the neoliberal order from which has given rise to it, it ends up socially reproducing that neoliberal order in the most progressive cloak possible. Okay? The result, ironically, would be to turn not towards intersectional understandings, but a further entrenchment of an amoral, market-driven individualism in which individual growth, social advancement, and autonomy trump all else. Oh my god, this is written in 2015. Okay, there are some people recognizing this. I'm not the only crazy person. And the fucked up part is, in searching this stuff, to try to search a critique of neoliberal intersectionality, of neoliberal prescriptive intersectionality, of biased universal intersectionality, necessarily biased, because we can't escape bias, because we can't escape blind spot bias. Because of that, okay, it plays into the social capital game. It's neoliberal from not just from content, but medium itself. Okay? Of course, these and other problems challenge the utility of intersectionality framework to the extent that these critiques have merit, and I believe they do. Thank you, whoever wrote this. This leaves us with the pressing question of whether the weaknesses of intersectionality framework seriously challenge the utility of the metaphor. See, I don't like the word utility. I don't like the word utility. Frederick Jameson talking about metaphor or analogy, or worse, stimulate a kind of re-envisioning, rethinking, and reinvigorating of theoretical psychology that would not benefit theoretical psychologists or those who potentially have something to gain from the work of theoretical psychologists. Back to Capitalism and Psychology by Ron Roberts, and this wonderful quote which says that in trying to understand capitalism, trying to understand the market, psychology has worked to improve the ways in which capitalism and the market invade our subjectivity. Okay? In providing a brief response to this question, I think it is important to distinguish between the framework of intersectionality and its actual and potential applications and uses. This is my distinction between interpretive intersectionality or analytic intersectionality and prescriptive intersectionality. I think that's what my problem is. My problem is not with analytic intersectionality. My problem is with this colonialist prescriptive intersectionality. Okay? Indeed, as noted, the distinction has motivated some feminist scholars to focus less on what intersectionality is and what it does, more on what it does in stimulating more complex understandings of power relations and advancing a synergy of critical inquiry and practice. I don't like the word synergy. This is one of those idioms. Synergy. See, you have to be hyper aware when you're reading this shit because, sorry, I think that she's doing a great job, but we really need to be aware of the idioms that we use. Synergy is one of those idioms. I love the word, but it's more of an organizational psychology word or whatever. This way of thinking about intersectionality is, I believe, useful in that it encourages as a starting point an explicit identification of the purposes for adopting any specific or general interpretation of how different social locations enable and constrain both individuals and groups. I have found that Georgia Warnicke's philosophical work on identity to be particularly insightful in this respect. See, the problem with Warnicke's work is 2003, 2007, 2011, everything before 2015, 2016. I don't know. I really need updated work here. I'll take a look at this, but I don't think it's going to satisfy me. Gadamer, there we go. Those space constraints permit only a brief elaboration, working within the hermeneutical tradition, especially that of Gadamer. Warnicke examines the conditions, historical, contextual, and varying, under which we make intelligible understandings of race and gender identities and identifications on intersections of race and gender. Warnicke writes, ignoring differences in women due to race and class raises the risk of overgeneralizing from the experiences and identity characteristics of white, middle-class American and European women. In addition, ignoring these marginalizes other women and militants against the possibility of acknowledging their potential different experiences and concerns. Again, this is not satisfactory for me because I think that we need to just really examine the whole ship of intersectionality, not trying to fix one part or another part. I think that the whole ship is almost already taken up by these neoliberal ideals. Okay, there's a reason why intersectionality was able to take over all of our institutions so quickly, because there was nothing, it wasn't challenging anything. Okay, she goes on to say that the goal of the hermeneutic task of examining these conditions of understanding is not enumerating categories of intersecting identities, but rather highlighting the variability of our more rhetoric. Okay, places important on recognizing and in understanding our own and others' identities we make bequeathed to us by the histories and traditions to which we belong. Any understanding, interpretation is only but one possibility for understanding, and we are identities only in their context. This doesn't challenge neoliberalism. This crap. Remember, incompleteness, contextuality, and limited duration. Look, what we need is to examine Habermas's idea of the public sphere. Okay, we need to go back to that debate that's already happening for a very long time about what it means to have multiple religions within the same sphere. Those difficult questions are already happening in the realm of philosophy that none of these fucking people actually read that difficult work, okay? That's difficult work. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel when the greatest, I don't know, he's not the greatest philosopher, but I don't know, the greatest, public philosopher, institutional philosopher, Habermas, has been working on these issues for the longest time. Okay? What we need to be doing is analyzing what it means for multiple religions to belong in the same sphere. And this is a 3,000-year-old conversation. And these people think that they can reinvent the wheel out of nowhere. Moreover, although Warnke emphasizes the importance of recognizing the intersections of blah, 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 a host of these variables in these identities we carry, she also acknowledges that understanding identity in terms of such intersections complicates the task of exploring the disadvantages that women, and presumably these groups of other social categories, suffer and carry the risk of disintegrating the capacity for collective action. Yeah, that's the point. That's what I've been yelling at everybody for. There is no collective action anymore, because we moralize the commodification of emotional labor. Okay, once I started saying that, someone actually wrote an article about that. Okay, one person wrote an article about that, but I was the first guy to say the commodification of emotional labor. But then I realized it's not really the commodification that's really the problem. It's the moralization of the commodification that's the problem. As such, it is essential that we understand identity and identification as being more fluid than fixed. Look, transracialism. Can we be transracial? This fluidity doesn't solve anything, okay? And that different contexts in which we live and act will call certain features of our identities into the foreground, leaving others into the background. There's so much more interesting conversations happening in philosophy right now. But the problem is, these are the psychologists. They don't read the philosophers. These psychologists, with their categories and their scientific studies, quote, they don't understand the complications that are going into this. Okay? It is in their scientism. Okay, it is in the spirit of Warnke's approach that I believe intersectionality might serve as a useful metaphor for re-envisioning theoretical psychology, not to mention for re-envisioning intersectionality itself. Okay, so you want to use intersectionality to be a useful metaphor to re-envision intersectionality itself. First, as I tried to emphasize above, my intention has not been to advance intersectionality as a methodological, meta-theoretical. A meta-theoretical framework. God, Bell Hooks, help me. I know you're out there now. Help me. You can understand my mind now. You can see through everything, right? Bell. Rather, I have used intersectionality in a more inspirational way, in the sense of trying to think outside of the box. Intersectionality is not outside the box. It's the box that we all think in. We have to think in. Our social capital relies on thinking about within the realm of intersectionality. About where theoretical psychology is situated and how theoretical psychologists might understand where their individual and collective works fit within the discipline and at the world at large. No, get the fuck out of the world at large. Especially, okay, intersectionality is for the United States and North America. That's it. And what this work might ultimately achieve. Intersectionality must stick within the, places like Canada, United States, Australia, okay? That's where intersectionality might be able to be applied. I don't even know if Australia, but Canada, United States. Everywhere else does not need intersectionality. It's a particular cure for a particular illness. Another theme I would like to take away from the work is the hermeneutical tradition which her perspectives are embedded. Yeah, that's important, but it's not, you can't find that in Warnicki's work, most likely. It is the importance of dialogue and openness to others' interpretations and perspectives. That is, understanding of their identities and identifications as theoretical psychologists. A third, okay, so that's the best point so far. A third theme concerns the ongoing construction or reconstruction of theoretical psychology that necessarily comes about in our continued attempts to make sense of what we do as a theoretical psychologist. Such self-examinations will, if conducted in a constructive spirit, allow for continual renewal and regeneration of theoretical psychology. Oh God. While also acknowledging that the conditions of our understandings of the sub-discipline and the work we do, so too will and the work we do change, so too our identities and theoretical psychologies be fluid, partial, and incomplete. Okay, it's fucking late. Okay, and I'm reading this shit. Let me end by stating that already, you're ending already? But this was the best part. The question of, does intersectionality harm? And the answer is yes, okay? And we're gonna get to that, alright? We're gonna read more. Let me end by stating that really none of what I presented here is new. At best, it's a reframing, a reinterpretation of, oh god damn it. Okay. That is, theoretical psychology has a long tradition of examining itself. Moreover, much of what I suggested above is not inconsistent. Okay, it has a long tradition of examining itself, but that's not how it becomes institutionalized. This self-examination is not institutionalized in the prison system, in the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, that self-examination does not find itself in those institutions, and that's the problem. Moreover, much of what I have suggested above is not inconsistent with past appeals by theoretical psychologists for epistemological and methodological pluralism. We don't need epistemic changes, okay? There's only one episteme. There's only one episteme. And what's that episteme? It's the episteme of neoliberal colonialism. Okay, we are already in neoliberal colonialism. We have to realize that how can we get out of neoliberal colonialism? There's a social inertia. Okay, Stephen Colbert talked about how he's being conscious of himself, of himself. So he takes out his cell phone. And he's like, wait, I don't have to take out my cell phone. I put it back in my pocket. And so I can people watch. But then you look at all the other people. And all the other people have taken out their cell phones. Okay? And then, so what does Colbert do? He takes out his cell phone again. What does this shitty analogy, have to do with anything? It's that the whole system, okay, is geared towards neoliberal subjectivity. Okay, so in a way, I'm taking on, it's like you have to be actively swimming against the tide. The tide is already pre-established. The tide is the tide of neoliberal subjectivity. Every aspect of our society is designed to create and recreate neoliberal subjectivity. Okay? If you want to be a critical psychologist, it's like being an anti-racist. You have to be an active anti-racist. You have to be actively anti-racist. You can't just repeat idioms. Okay, you can't just be like, oh, I was told this, so I'm just gonna repeat idioms, and that's gonna give me social capital. See, in a way, what I'm asking for is something much more radical than the anti-racists are. I'm asking for a much more active anti-racism, but that doesn't mean we go to little children and teach them about, to classify each other based on race, which is what they're doing, which is what these fucking insane, traumatized people are doing. Okay, it's from a trauma, it's from a collective trauma that a lot of these psychologists are working off of. Okay, let's just see what the ending here is. Transdisciplinary approaches, okay, blah, blah, blah. Together, they have promoted pluralistic and also integrative and reflective scholarship and practice. It is important, however, to heed Krishner's and others' warning about the potential dangers that may accompany integration and unification. Yes, that's good. And of the value of multiple, even sometimes incommensurate discourses. Sometimes it's always incommensurate. That's the fucking issue here. Okay? We just assume everybody's on the same nice little kumbaya intersectional boat by shutting everybody up. It's insane. Unification for the sake of unification should never be the objective. Okay, but the thing is, we are already unified. It's contradictory, right? We are already unified. What unifies us? The fact that we are all on a river of neoliberal subjectivity. That everywhere we look, just like the Stephen Colbert example, that every aspect of our society creates an individualistic firm. Okay, the neoliberal university. And who are the people fighting this? Okay, who are the people fighting this? And that's what Thomas Teo is all about. And I haven't actually looked into his work, but I will. Who are the people that are actually fighting neoliberal subjectivity? It's fascist subjectivity. Okay, right now, there are only two options. It's either you're a neoliberal subjectivity or you're a fascist subjectivity. Okay, and we need the third pill, as Zizek says. We need a third pill. Okay, and what is that third pill? Well, you guys are not offering it because you guys are part of the moralization of the commodification of emotional labor, which in fact is helping fascism grow in the shadows, because the fascists know that the university is a fucking globalist institution, what they call. Okay? And this kind of thing happens because we don't try to understand the fascists. Okay, so but then we give we give, if we don't hold people accountable in one sense, but then we give passes to people in another sense, the same people. Hence, the metaphor of an intersectional theoretical psychology I have explored therein should not be taken as a prescription for theoretical or meta-theoretical system for unifying theoretical psychology. Rather, my aim has been used. See, I'm giving you the fucking system, okay? I'm giving you the system. There's already unification, okay? We're already unified. But what unifies us is not intersectionality. What unifies us is the neoliberal aspect, okay, is our neoliberal religion. That's what unifies us. All right? So we already have a point in which of universality, and that's the revolutionary potential of all this. Okay? That's why I'm focusing so much on this, because I see that there is a revolutionary potential in this, but only if we're not stupid. Okay? Only if we don't stupidly repeat neoliberal idioms. Only if we don't cop out to the like writing style, oh, blah blah. Okay, rather my aim has been to use intersectionality to explore where the commonalities and differences lie within and beyond the discipline to come and suggest something common good. All right. If we were truly intersectional, we'd have fascists at the table, and I think we need to have fascists at the table, because fascists can teach us one or two things about fighting against neoliberalism. And this is another problem that we have. We can't distinguish between neoliberals and fascists. We think that they're one and the same. Okay? There's the reason why neoliberals and fascists are not one and the same is because as the Nazis showed during World War II, as my Ritual Traces 2 examines. When the Nazis had a choice of whether they should continue to divert their resources from the camps to the war effort, they decided to continue. They decided the irrational choice. They made the non-economic choice of not diverting resources from the camps and into the war effort. That's how you know the fascists are not pure capitalists. Capitalism is a means to an end for them. It's not an end in themselves. For neoliberals, capitalism is the end in itself. It's the means and the end. It's to create neoliberal subjectivity. It's Hayek. Oh shit, it's late. I got Hayek and Heidegger mixed up. Oh man, both of them would hate that, I guess. All right. Thank you for listening to my bell hooks rant. Dear bell hooks, I apologize. I think I contributed to your spiritual death. I was really shocked that bell hooks died, because I felt that bell hooks was the only one that could talk about complicity at some point in her life, and how and now that she's dead, I have no hope for progressive politics anymore, because as we saw, Butler debate and Crenshaw I have no hope for in terms of talking about complicity. Butler, maybe she'll talk about complicity, but Butler has so many other contradictions that she has to deal with. If there was one person that could have talked about complicity, it was bell hooks. And unfortunately, she's dead now. And I'm sad, because she was the only one that could understand the limitations of her own work. But now that she's dead, she's going to be venerated. She's going to be a martyr. And we're not going to see the end of it. I'm not going to see the end of it. So I'll just do a little moment of silence for her, regardless of whether I agreed with her at the end of the day, because I was a student of hers when I was younger.